Well, thank you again. Glad to be back down here with you. I can't promise you a lot of money other than what economic development can bring you and what gaming will give us. Now, economic development, healthcare issues, education, employment, job training, budget areas. All areas we've talked about before. One of the things that you were asking Johnny and then Richard mentioned it, you know, when Richard talked about our budget having line items that would crisscross, I think you're asking about a consolidation of program operations. And that's what we don't have. And that's one of the things I want to tackle. It was brought up in 03. I talked to that issue in 06 when I ran for chairmanship. And serving as the TA for those 2 years from 04 through 06, it's very hard for the travel administrator to be on top of every program because you had, at that time I had 29 to 31 directors. And you can't see every director every day about every little issue they had. And having that many and working at cross purposes, a lot of times the TA can't be on top of every director for each of their little needs, and so they ran to the chairman. And that created a mismatch of operations and ideas and goals and objectives. So I'm asking you to elect me as the chairman so I can put in place the plan that would solidify, make our management structure more solid, would be more concise, and while we have the budget has a lot of line items, they will work in departments that were very similar. Now, Johnny, you held it up. You talked about the outreach centers and the funding for the one in Norman and Anadarko. Just let me tell you, it wasn't easy to open the outreach center in Anadarko. It was put on the floor from people in Anadarko. So what Richard is telling you is essentially the same. There was a representation from Anadarko. They needed help with jobs. They needed help with emergency needs. So the community came to me as the travel administrator and said, what can we do? We go to the CBC members, they don't listen to us, they don't help us, and when it comes time for general council meetings, they don't support us. But yet right now there's about 3,500 voting members from Anadarko to Carnegie. All Caddo and a little bit of Kiowa County. And the majority of them vote. But they're like you, they get discouraged. And that's why I'm here today and still running to be your chairman. Don't be discouraged. If I had been that discouraged, I wouldn't be here today. And you've heard it from good quality people recommending to you, send a delegation, send a delegation. That's what Norman did. Norman had a delegation of 1 to 5 people, but there's one person that got put on several committees and was always on that chairman's door, making sure the chairman knew who was voting for him and the chairman had to do something. That's politics. But I'm not going to be that kind of chairman. I'm going to come to your door. I'm going to come back to you. What are we doing? What is it you need? Because we can work with you right now. And it's very simple. Richard mentioned it, and I brought that up in those things. Now, all we need is a little contract with you, and that the assistance they need goes by fax, by operation, and Heights back there wants help to paint his house. We can do that through social services, because if it's a health issue, okay, if it's not a cosmetic thing, but if it's a health issue because you have mold or you have infestations of critters that you need to get rid of, but you got to get it sprayed, you got to and then paint over all of that, seal it, and then paint it. That's a health issue. And we've done that before. I did that with families in Wichita, Kansas when it was an emergency issue. They had to move out and come back in because of storms. We did it in Oklahoma City and Norman. And we didn't go through the social service program necessarily. We went through HIP because that's where the funding should come from. So there are things we can do, and Richard's right on the button with a little contract of service and agreements to service our people. As I mentioned earlier, we did it in Los Angeles with the Navajo Nation. And they would send the money, they would assist the people, send back the receipts and information, and get an accounting of the money they sent. And they would always have an accounting every month of how the money would be spent. That's very simple. In economic development, at first I want to dispel any rumor. This came out real strongly this past Saturday. At a function I was not at. I was doing a powwow for the community, a birthday powwow for a graduate. And then there was a benefit powwow that helped me with my campaign. And so I am not going to be coming in chairman throwing people out of their jobs. That's not what a chairman does. The chairman we elect and should have and should ever more elect is someone who's going to look at the experience, the knowledge, and the background of those individuals and the service they're giving to the community. not there to throw anybody out of work. I am there to ensure that the budget is being handled, programs are given their services, and employees are being treated fairly, and the employees are doing an adequate job and better than adequate most of the time to the community. So I'm not there to throw anybody out of their job. Past history scares our people. Change scares people. But I didn't throw anybody out when I got elected TA, and that was the rumor to get rid of everybody. No, I've been through those, ladies and gentlemen. I've been through those scenarios 2 times with the Comanche Nation. I was never fired for doing an incompetent job. I was fired because of politics. Comanche Nation. Somebody wants to say fired twice, but yeah. I ran for office the second time. First time they didn't want me in just because they do this TA. A job description for the TA, there is one. I had one when I walked in. It's the same job description Delphine Nelson had. The biggest and best job descriptions in that Constitution would say daily management of programs. And that's all the programs that are funded by our budget and the BIA budget. At one time we had a federal budget of about $18 million. That's been dwindled down because you have contracts for a year or 3 years. You service, you provide, you perform, and then you're supposed to be on your own. So we're down to about $10 million, and now we're losing more because of this red flag status that the tribe has, because of audits, because of misappropriation of funds, or last time when Mr. Redoff was here, no documentation to back up expenditures. No documentation to show that we did what we said we were going to do and provided the service, and that documentation is missing. That's why we're on red flag status. That's why we're close to losing the $8 to $10 million of federal funds we have. Most of the BIA programs. So I'm going to be in office to ensure that that's not going to be the case. It wasn't the case when I was TA. I didn't have complete authority over those managers. Hence, what they're trying to do to Mr. Nelson, restrict his responsibility to over certain programs. That's not what we want to be elected here for. He wasn't elected not to do something. He was elected to perform the job. That's what I'm there to ensure he's going to do. I've told people I am not going to be the chairman who signs off on daily issues. I'm not going to be the chairman who says this one's hired, that one's not, this one's not. That's not the way a government should work. Policies and procedures are in place to ensure that people with oversight authority, such as the CBC, are there to see that he does his job. And we look at the big picture. Economic development. I'm told we have roughly about 3,000 acres that we bought in parcels of 80, 120, 160, or 360 acres. A lot of that is farming and grazing land. Yes, sometimes in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't have water, sewer, or electricity. What are we going to do with it? My way of thinking, and Eddie can talk about it maybe, what are we going to earn if we raise hay and feed for cows and horses? A lot of money. A lot of money. We've got fellows that can do ranch hand, farm work, or want to work. This land is in such many areas that we can't always look at it every day. We need to put a crew to work. Just hire a crew to lay the hay and the seed for us, and come back and harvest twice a year. There's a lot of money in that, especially farmers and ranchers. And Oklahoma is horse country. A lot of people have horses, and in wintertime it's hard to get feed for them. So we need to look at those avenues. At one point in time, we were best horsemen, and we had lots of cattle, ladies and gentlemen. Big pasture was called big pasture because the Comanches ran cattle. Different chiefs had their bands working these cattle all the time, bringing in longhorns from Texas and New Mexico, raising them and then selling them to the soldiers and farmers because that was easy, that was natural for them. Same way with horses. Not that we need to get back into the horse business, but that's just the example of why you can use all this 3,000 acres we have and put it to good use, a few people to work, and some income for us. We can lease the rest of the Fort Sill industry will do the same thing prior to us putting the water park. There are things that we can do, we need to look at. They won't take long because we have a lot of old plans laying around that need to be reviewed, brought up to date. In the area of gaming, people are spending, I think gaming plans to spend $10, $12 million on renovation for Comanche Nation games. You need to ask yourself, where did they get that money? I want to come to you